Hello and welcome to Thinking Out Loud. I'm your co-host, Cameron McAllister.
And I'm outraged, Nathan Rittenhouse. In this episode, Cameron and I are outraged at fake outrage. I think you'll find many points in which this resonates with the experience that you might have of watching people gasp, horror, shock, surprise, and you're like, no, that's not true. There's another motivation for you faking your outrage. Like, share, and subscribe our content, and if you appreciate the work that we do and want to support it, you can do so by visiting www.toltogether.com.
I'm outraged too, and we're here to talk to you about rage. So let's start with
I don't know if it's
Swifties.
I don't know if it's real rage, but it might turn into that. Here we go. All right, lead us on, Cameron.
Taylor Swift released Life of a Showgirl. Don't worry, everybody. We're not going to really be talking about Taylor Swift, at least not for very long at all. And we're certainly not, I'm not going to give you any real opinions about Taylor Swift either. Sorry. But anyway, it has a song on it that is quite sexually explicit. It's called Wood. Not going to go into the details. You can figure those out, look them up for yourself. Here's why I bring that up, Nathan. A lot of people are really allegedly angry about that. You know, you have people talking about this. You have Allie Beth Stuckey talking about this. Others, cultural commentators saying this is not the role model you want for our children, and especially for your little girls. Let me pause there because I can already see smoke coming out of Nathan's ears. What's
Well,
your response to somebody
yeah.
who says that?
Well, I guess the question is, oh, so this is the moment, this is the line that you think Americans stars are not maybe good role models for your little girls. So the whole thing just comes across as I don't know. It can't possibly be that people are like, this is
Disingenuous?
where we're going to. So disingenuous. That's a yeah, a generous way of putting it.
I think so. Let me take us into the territory I'd like to go with this. We'll see where you want to go, Nathan. This has been on my mind quite a bit lately as I've considered the culture war. Let's put it
Okay.
that way.
Yeah.
I think one of the points of tension that we find ourselves in, Nathan, you and I, and our approach on thinking out loud in general is that we stand aside from the culture war. We kind of, Nathan, you put it really well not too long ago. You said basically, hey, I think America is Babylon. And I mean, another place that we could point is, this is from Pilgrim's Progress. We could say America is Vanity Fair. And so you conduct yourself accordingly.
But and that's but
I
that
don't
okay, but
think,
let me clarify there just in
yeah,
case people miss the context of that. That's not to say that we don't think it's great to be in America or that America is a bad place inherently or there's anything wrong with our patriotism or love for the country in which we live. It's just saying that it in and of itself cannot embody or generate the spiritual or moral paradigms that make it work. And so if you're trying to extract
yeah.
a spiritual dynamic and a worldview and a moral framework as a Christian out of a political structure, it's not going to happen well, if at all. So that's the context there, just to be clear as we go. So yeah, where are we looking for our marching orders here? Um, Matters.
Yeah, so let's before I move on to broader themes, let's talk specifically just for a moment about about Taylor Swift or what we brought up here. The reason let's make a few arguments about this, Nathan. Just so I think both you and I would say that when you're looking at any kind of a pop star, when you're looking to them for guidance or as a moral role model, you have already taken a step in the wrong direction. Now, I can hear some people already screaming and saying, these people, whether they like it or not, assume an awesome responsibility and they are ambassadors, and young people are looking to them whether they like it or not. Yeah, I've heard that argument before.
No, they like it.
That doesn't change. And so
I
yeah,
mean,
well,
the
be
entire
the, and yeah,
industry is
sure. I mean,
the entire
sells
industry is
records
yeah. This is how it works. That's the game.
predicated on, yeah, yeah. But be that as it may, let's set that to the side. Does the artist have some moral responsibility? Well, sure. Are they going to use it responsibly? Almost certainly not. This is part of what if you do live in Vanity Fair, if you do live in Babylon, one thing that it can do is it can help you to temper your expectations.
There you go.
And so if you recognize yeah, so if you live in Babylon, Taylor Swift, Sabrina Carpenter, Olivia Rodrigo, or whoever it is, the Jonas Brothers,
Bad Bunny.
they're not going to Bad Bunny. They wow, Nathan.
Ah,
Let's just take a moment to appreciate this
I
pop
read the
culture
news
reference from
sometimes.
Nathan. Of course. But these people are not gonna be paragons of virtue. In some ways, Nathan, this always takes me back to Elvis Presley when he first burst onto the scene, and he was given the name Elvis the Pelvis by journalists, and there was real moral outrage and people because there was hysteria surrounding him. Also, the Beatles, by the way, there was Beatlemania. There was hysteria around this. Girls were passing out at their concerts. People were just they were kind of swarming their vehicles. Same thing happened with the Rolling Stones. It's good to say this because it's just all that say it's nothing new. But I think there's no substitute for walking through these different singers, whatever they are, pop culture phenomenons with discernment with our own children. We have to do that. There's no there's no one size fits all for that. So just to state that if we recognize we're in a fallen order and that America is not some special place, but it's the country that we live in. We're both American citizens, and we're happy to be here,
Well,
and
I
we love
think we
our
can make it
country,
bigger than
but
America, though.
we just have those
This is a
proper
this is a
expectations.
this is a
Yeah.
global. I mean, it's not like all the German pop stars are really clean. Um, is there's a little bit something here though that does point to the power of the arts in general, and this is part of their beauty, is that they do allow ideas to slide more seamlessly through cultural gatekeepers and kind of our like how many people listening, if you're honest, have found yourself humming along to or singing along to a song that has a really catchy tune and really bad lyrics. And when I mean bad, I mean like gross. You're like, wait a second, that's not. But because the rhythm of the tune or the maybe even the artistic skill of a different medium pulls you into participating in something that if you like broke it down to what is actually being communicated here, you'd be like, oh no, gross. I don't want to have anything to do with that. So there, we don't want to make this sound like, oh, this is super easy
Yep.
because art and music are powerful things, and we as humans are hardwired to resonate deeply with messages presented in those formats. So this is not a condemnation of people who enjoy the arts. It's simply saying why are like, oh, at this threshold suddenly we're going to be appalled by something. Where I think a lot of people would be like, well, if you had been paying attention for like, oh, I don't know, the last 2,000 years, you probably would have been appalled a little sooner.
So let's go a little bit more broad here for a second, and we can come back here anytime you want. You're right. The arts, part of their power and part of their danger is in their power to seduce and to slip past the watchful dragons, as C.S. Lewis put it so well, meaning to slip past your kind of moral scruples or your critical faculties. You can, yeah, if you're seduced, if you're enchanted by something, it's just very powerful. And in some ways, you could make an argument that music is at the very forefront. Some people would focus on images, but music is really powerful. You internalize it. So yeah, it has a way of captivating that few other art forms do. So it's worth pointing that out. But Nathan, all right, let's put one thing on the table here. A lot of people will talk about a big artist like Taylor Swift because it's an easy way to get web traffic.
Hmm.
If Taylor Swift has a new album coming out, everybody's gonna be talking about it. Everybody's going to be, it's gonna captivate the public imagination. And if you want to get views, you talk about Taylor Swift. So there's that too. But what? So why is fake outrage such a big thing these days? And so
Well,
here's
I'll
one
answer it once
line.
you
Yeah,
give your answer. You go first.
I want to hear your answer first.
Oh,
Oh boy.
it's a part of community development and formation. This is how we find our people. So think of the story in the New Testament where you have the man who's beating his breast before God. doesn't even look up to heaven, and then the other guy praying, "I thank you, God, that I'm not like that." That story is given to us
Mm,
as a internal conversation between two men, and Jesus says, that the former rather than the latter one way justified. Now we live in a time where we don't look to the heavens and say, "I thank you, God, that I'm not like that person." We post about that, and we find all the other people who thank God that they're not like that person, and then that becomes our community. So our outrage towards some other behavior or political party or person or entity or organization becomes the way in which we
mm,
signal who we are, not well, partly as an identity forming thing, but more clearly as a boundary set, like of showing your in group that you're still in the group and finding your people, finding
mhm.
your tribe. And so that same thing can be said for bumper stickers, political signs, and all manner of the way we dress, talk, speak, act, what we listen to. So all of us are communicating something with our words and our lifestyle and our clothing and our choices of vehicle. Like everybody does this. So it's not like we don't. You do it. If you're listening to this and you're human, you do this. But some of these forms of outrage definitely play into sort of a staying on brand category of how do I find my people who are also outraged at the same thing or also dislike the same thing. So I think there's an identity and a community building aspect of some of this.
Surprise, surprise. You and I are saying similar things here.
All right,
So
let's
I think to underscore what you've just said, one of the best one of the better works of cultural analysis out there is René Girard's The Scapegoat. And in that book, he argues very much what Nathan is saying here. He'll say that one of the ways to bring people together is through a common enemy. And so to do that, you scapegoat. Now, part of what makes this sad is that you think that a lot of these issues on the surface are presented as issues of values.
Mhm.
We are deeply offended by a sexually explicit song from Taylor Swift, who has an audience of many members of her audience are very young people. But in fact, what's really happening here is, and there will be traces of that, but what this is more about is, because after all, if what we've said is true, Taylor Swift doing that is so it's not surprising. Not only is it not surprising, it's totally and completely predictable. After all, if you
So
look at the average trajectory of a female pop star, this is you could almost say begins in the Disney Channel, gets a record contract, flirts around with the edge, and then goes on a gradually more and more seductive journey. This is true of Britney Spears, this is true of Sabrina Carpenter, this is true of, Miley Cyrus. On and on we could go. So, I'm just saying this to state there this is an entirely predictable move. So, what does that leave us with? That leaves us with people trying to find enemies, common enemies, negative situations that can help them consolidate a movement, to consolidate their identity. And so behind a lot of this really is politics, more so than values.
okay,
And yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm
yeah,
gonna say
well,
that. I think
because
that's true. I know
well, well, there
that's gonna make some people mad.
there's an in between step that we skipped over, but here's why we skipped over is the other thing. The way that this comes across though is that people are incredibly naive. So that's how I would experience watching people's fake outrage. Either you're naive or you're virtue signaling. Because it's hard for me to think that you just now realized that that's just something that is up in this industry. Or I mean, what's the title of the album? Showgirl. This is what everybody wants their little kid to grow up to be, right? A showgirl. Like to yeah,
Sure.
it's we're giving you're either giving way too much credence to it and you're using it for your own personal identity formation, or you're totally naive about the way that the world, like you can almost like imagine the fake gasp, fake gasp with a hand over the mouth, like can't believe no, and for lack of better words, like grow up. This is the world that we live in. Non Christians are
Mhm.
going to do non Christian stuff. people who have millions of views do them because of sexually explicit content is part of the entertainment industry. Like, take our head out of the sand here and look at the way that the world really works and deal with it as it is. But if you're just suddenly outraged about something, there's going to be a large percentage of, I think, people our age and other ages as well that are Christians are going to be like, "Oh, good grief! Like, seriously, where have you been? Why is this suddenly surprising to you?" And so it comes across not as you're virtuous; it comes across as either you're naive about the brokenness of the world around you and the reality of sin, or you haven't really been paying attention, or you're doing this for some
Or
self-serving reason.
mhm,
And that's why we skip those
right.
in between parts, because Cameron and I aren't really willing to believe that people are that naive that they're just now offended by something Taylor Swift might do. I don't
No,
know
I'm
how we
not.
got on Taylor Swift. We
And
could do this with
do I th
n- eh, all sorts of other categories. Can you believe,
well,
Cameron,
do I
they
really
make movies
believe
these days that
that
have the F word in them? I mean, that's what it comes across sounding like.
well, you know what? The example that popped into my head, Nathan, would be if somebody was shocked that a show like Euphoria on HBO features explicit sex and drug use, or that Game of Thrones has explicit sexuality in it. Really? You're shocked that HBO has, which is builds its brand around this is showing this kind of thing. Also, another way of putting it, to just illustrate the point, do I do I really believe that experienced Christian reporters are shocked by a sexually explicit song from Taylor Swift? No, I don't. So
I
if
mean,
they
it's
make
this is what it
content that
sounds like.
expresses shock and outrage,
It sounds like this. If you're having trouble following along with it's like me being like, Cameron, I cannot believe there are apples on that apple tree. I mean, it's an apple tree. That's why it has apples on it. It's
yep.
so yeah.
So part of hear us carefully. If you're This is why both Nathan and I there's a sentence that both Nathan and I noticed in Paul Kingsnorth's new book, Against the Machine. He's talking about politics, but he could easily be talking about the culture war as well. He said, basically people fighting over these issues, it's the picture he has is of two bald men fighting over a comb. It's an exercise in futility. That is largely now, it's important for us to state this outright because it will name some of the frustrations some of you have when you listen to us. Are we saying by if we say something like the culture war is largely an exercise in futility, are we saying, walk away, don't do anything, don't try to help, don't try to be salt and light? No, by no means are we saying that. What we are saying is that to be a Christian in a fallen world means that you're part of a fallen moral order in whatever city or whatever nation, whatever neighborhood you find yourself. It doesn't mean it's not a recipe for quietism at all, but it also means that you walk in with the proper expectations. You're not going to now you can see reform. You can. And you can see change, but you have to think in smaller, more local terms where you actually exercise some influence. And for some of us that might mean, "Hey, my children are not going to listen to certain music." That's fine. You work this out in different ways, but the notion that we need to call for some major change in our artists that we would somehow take back the culture so that you wouldn't have people making this kind of music. I think that's misguided.
That's a charitable way to put it. I think, are we there's also a sense in which it seems to me, Cameron, that we are I'm gonna go tread carefully here how to phrase this. The end of what I want to say is like, I really don't feel like I need a online influencer to tell me that Taylor Swift isn't a good role model for my daughter. I want to be able to figure that out on my own pretty easily just by basic Christian discernment. I don't need a political movement in order to help me arrive at that conclusion. Like, I got there a long time before Allie Beth Stuckey told me, or I don't listen to her, but I'm just using that as
Yeah.
an example
Whoever it
of
was. Yeah.
whoever it
Yep.
was, whatever the context is like some of this just seems like, really? Like, some of this just falls in the category of what I would consider like basic Christian discernment and parenting. It doesn't,
Yeah, it
and
does. But
so
again,
its existence is scary to me for a different reason.
if it's serving a political purpose, which is what I think it is, then it helps to have a common enemy for and you can coalesce, your movement can coalesce around a common enemy. And now, this is not peculiar to Christians. Everybody is doing this. People on
Oh,
all
right.
sides of the
Yeah.
political aisle are doing this. And trafficking in kind of alarmism. If you look at history, you will, historians and sociologists have long pointed out what's really good for the economy and what's really good to get a culture kind of working together again and to galvanize everybody, you need a war. And
Oh,
I
sure.
mean,
Yeah.
that's nothing new. Yeah, you need but what happens when you don't have an actual Nazi or you don't have an actual communist? Oh boy. Well, now you have to find an enemy. You got to find an enemy that you can use to mobilize your movement. And so think about also I'm just while we're treading in the through this minefield, let's just step on a few mines, Nathan. Think about the evolution of the neologism woke.
Sure.
Look at how that was used. Because
It was a compliment.
this is a concrete example we can. Yes, initially, it just meant it was just a cinnamon. There you go. It was a cinnamon. It was a synonym for being
For rope.
socially conscious. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. But it was a synonym for being socially conscious and aware of levels of systemic corruption and racism that happen. I mean, but then gradually it was used in a very cynical fashion, and we actually have it's on record. I mean, somebody like Christopher Rufo, I remember reading through his playbook. He actually composed a playbook of how he would take this specific concept and tarnish it and use it to mobilize the right against a common enemy. And so he said, what we're going to do is we're going to associate woke with radical forms of left wing thought. We're going to associate it with neo Marxism. And you can see now that this was largely successful, by the way. But let's just to be equal opportunity offenders, Nathan. We've talked here before about Patrick Deneen. So I've seen left-wing people use similar tactics against someone like him. He's sympathetic to some right-wing figures, and some of them, let's be honest, fairly fringe. I mean, Viktor Orban, come on. But to then use phrases like fascist adjacent to
Mhm.
describe Patrick Deneen, that's doing the same thing. And it's is it accurate? Absolutely, no, it's not accurate at all. I mean, he's a devout Catholic who teaches at Notre Dame University, for goodness sakes. Fascist adjacent? One of the real tragedies here is the way that words and language is cheapened when you do this.
You know what,
Fascist
Cameron?
ceases to these days, a phrase like
So,
fascist doesn't even really mean that much anymore because it's so overused. But you see, this is a cynical game that people are playing for power. It's
but
not about values. It's not about so anyway,
yeah, okay.
yeah.
So let me let's zoom out here because I think I'm starting to put my finger on what really irritates about this, and what it is it's fundamentally dishonest, and it's not precise with words, and it's intellectually lazy. When you just start quickly adding labels to people for stuff that they don't have anything to do, or you suddenly have an aha moment like, "Oh, I hadn't been thinking about this category for a long time. Suddenly I'm offended by it." It it just um yeah, it's just fundamentally dishonest across the board, and I think you and I are cringing in a moment
Mhm.
in which the more ambiguous, but the more flamboyant, no details necessary conversations are the ones that gain the most traction and shape the public imagination to the highest order. And I would say we shouldn't be surprised by that as Christians, but as Christians, we should have a far deeper ability to discern, to fact check, to speak truth, to recognize we're going to have to give an account for every word that we speak. We do have a much higher standard in what we place in our minds, what comes out of our mouths, what we like, share, and subscribe to, what we focus on, how we label and think about other human beings. Um, and so I sense this tension that within the church, like the tension between the church and the non-church is always going to be there because it's a different set of moral values and principles. But within the church, here this podcast is a
Mhm.
little bit of a like, hey, to the Christian, think about this, like, and be careful with your words and be honest about what's actually in your heart. And in doing so, that'll probably lead you to being
Mm.
quiet a whole lot more.
Well, one thing that needs to be said is that this is very effective. Scapegoating works. That's why people do it. So, yes, if you want to take a slogan or a soundbite about somebody and run with it, what's going to win out? The soundbite or the slogan, or the more discerning, more complex, more ambiguous examination of the person? Well, if the slogan's going to win every time, and people are going to say, well, no, this person has more clarity. They have backbone. They know what they're saying. Do they? Or are they just taking the easy road? This is the game that people are playing in the culture war. And it's again, largely it's about gaining control and power. It's not necessarily always about values. And that's the sad fact about it. And that's why let me ask you this, Nathan. Taylor Swift writes a song about her well-endowed new soon to be husband. Are you offended?
Let me tell you a story. Can I tell you a story about my great grandma in response to this
Please.
question? Let's see if I can make this connection. So there was let's see, what year would this have been? This would have been like 1950s. So my great grandma has a daughter who's in college. She comes home wearing a skirt that at the time was apparently a little too short. I don't know what that is in the 50s, like knee length or something. And somebody at their church says, I'm surprised that a Christian lady like you would let their daughter dress like that. To which my great grandmother replied, I'm surprised that a Christian man like you would notice. Um,
Touche.
yeah. And so there's a little bit of I- like there's not a direct parallel there to the question you're asking, but there's a little bit of like, how do I honestly say I don't care? Um, to some of the
You know
stuff
what's
that
ironic?
help me out here. I'm digging myself in a hole, but fix it.
You're not. You're not. What's ironic is we are surrounded by a cultural scene where it's very you can say with full, full conviction, is nothing sacred? And you and I are not offended. But we are offended by people acting like they're offended by all of that.
Yeah. Welcome to thinking
I
out
am
loud.
offended.
Let's take this to the meta level quickly.
I'm offended by people pretending to be offended.
Yeah, it's dishonest.
That does annoy me because it's dishonest, as you've just said. I would rather people sober up and just admit, I this person represents a side that I don't like, and I want my side to win. I'd rather people just be honest about that, and I'd rather they say that than hide behind the veil of supposed moral offense, which yeah, I'm like you, Nathan. I think we've been here for a while, and also, let's open this can of worms. Christians are a part of this. This whole idea, if we are in a state of cultural decline, all of us are numbered in it, and we all have a part to play in it. And I don't see a whole lot of ownership on the part of many people who are screaming about how bad our culture is. In what ways do I aid and abet this culture? How am I part of this cultural scene? This is a shared culture, and so I think that's part of the conversation as well. I think what we're calling for is a way of discernment and prayer, a recognition that we live in a fallen world, and also a recognition that this world, as it is, will remain fallen. Changes can be made, but they're largely on a smaller scale. And if you're calling for discipleship of the heart for people, you're talking about face to face, nitty gritty kind of work. And having anyway,
Yeah,
I think I'm rambling, but
my future hope for the world has nothing to do with a theoretical possible reformation of the American pop music industry. Like, it's just not even in
there you
on
go.
my
Well
radar
said. Yeah.
as a category of, like, this is an important so here's the other thing. If Taylor Swift releases a gospel album, I'm going to largely feel exactly the same way.
Yeah, that's the other side of the coin, isn't it?
That's the other side. So let's run
We've
this.
been there.
Yeah.
That's what
So
happened with what happened with Kanye West. Yeah.
right. And you're like, well, why are since when did we start taking our theology from? So it's not a
Mhm.
it's so there is that piece of that's a little bit deeper, partly in that it doesn't matter what the content is. It's the category that's given us the content that is lamentable to me that Christians are offshoring their moral and spiritual discernment to celebrities.
Mhm.
Just seems like unsound footing for anybody in any category of life.
So, in conclusion here, some admonitions from us. Don't substitute your politics for your values, and don't pretend to be outraged by stuff that shouldn't surprise you. Taylor. Dallas Willard, that's not Taylor Swift. Dallas Willard said that a mark of spiritual maturity was not being shocked. And the older I
Mhm.
get, the more I see the truth of that statement. So just have the proper expectation. We all, I mean, I'm saying this to myself as much as to listeners, but we need to have the proper expectations when we think about the world around us, when we think about our neighborhoods, we think about our workplaces, especially for those of us who work in areas of ministry. I think sometimes there's an unhelpful idealism that can creep in. You know, you hear people say, "I can't believe this is happening in a church or this is happening in, in a ministry of all places." But I can, because you're still dealing with human beings. That doesn't excuse anything that happens,
You can
but
be
it
sad,
does
but
offer an
not surprised.
explanation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sad but not surprised. That's always I've always loved Nathan's phrase there, and I think that's apt when it comes to this episode.
Now we just got to come up with some kind of clickbait title for this to get you to click on it. Some sort of moral. You can't believe what they said. Outraged at the crowd gasped when they said. No, I mean it's the marketing thing of our world, and we're not going to. I'm not even good at it. Oh man.
Tabloid
Anyway,
headline. Yeah.
they're going to come up with somebody quick help us. No. Anyway, this is not us participating in the same thing that we're accusing other people of participating in. This is us saying, hey, we all do it, but let's pump the brakes a little bit on what it is that we decide to use our time getting worked up about with, and spend some time before the Lord on what should you be focusing on with your day, your time, and your energy and your talents. And that might be a better spot to start than the offended talking heads of the world. You've been listening to Thinking Out Loud, a podcast where we think out loud about current events and Christian hope.
Thanks for listening to Thinking Out Loud. If you'd like to learn more about what we do, book Nathan or Cameron, or if you'd like to support us financially, whether through a one-time donation or on a monthly basis, you can do so on the donate page at www.toltogether.com. That's toltogether.com. And please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and sharing this content with your friends. It really does help.